don't know where I'm going, but I know I'll be delighted, educated by the truth. Elevate, I'll be the proof of everything that is possible.
Hello and welcome to this healing session. I am so excited to have you all here today. I am your fearless host and guide, Rachel W. Robinson. Many of you know me as a victim rights attorney. I am also a gardener, a lyricist, a poet, contributing author to an international best-selling book aimed at preventing teen suicide. And I have tapped into so much of who I am in my healing journey. And so, of course, as you know, I am offering that to all of you, because no matter what happens in court, if your mind, soul, and spirit are not healed, there can be no justice. For most of my clients, well, all of my clients really, their healing journey begins with a 911 call. So I am really excited to have my guest today. He has been a police officer here in Denver, Colorado for 25 years. He has served in several different counties around the metropolitan area. He's wanted to be a police officer since he was in high school. And I am very excited to ask him about that journey and about what it means to be a police officer and what we can expect as we embark on our healing journeys after having to engage with the police. His name is Detective James Armstrong. And hi, Detective Armstrong. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I am great. Thank you so much for being here today. One of the things I want to ask you is, of course, how did you become a police officer?
For me, it started while I was in high school. They had an Explorer program where I went to school. You got to get training and be affiliated with a local police agency. You get training, you do ride-alongs, you get involved with investigations and just day-to-day activity at the police department. And then from there, I just continued the journey, went to college and started working.
Okay, I want to ask you, did you get involved in that program because you were a problem child, or were you always serving your community and like the perfect son? Like, how did you get involved in that? And how can other parents who want to get their children involved in these types of programs, what should they look for in their children?
I was probably somewhere in the middle. Not too bad, but always kind of, like being helpful, helping people that need help. Plus, it's nice when you're doing something different every day. Not everything's fun, but it's always different. If you wanted to get involved, if that's something that interests you, I would contact your local police agency. Some have Explorer programs. Denver has a cadet program, which you can get training in the police department, the fire station, the fire department, and they help pay for some college.
Amazing. Okay, thank you for sharing that. What type of education do police need in order to become a police officer in Colorado? You mentioned that you went to college. Was that required? What do you need?
That varies agency to agency. Some agencies require a 4-year degree. Some just require a high school diploma or GED. Some have military preference points. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can get involved with this. And not everybody's path has to be the same.
And what was your path? So you did do college, and then was that helpful for you to get into the academy?
I did do college. My senior year of college, I was sponsored and went to a police academy. At one point, I worked for the Arvada Police Department, which does require a 4-year degree. So I would not have gotten that job without that degree.
What did you study in college? Was it how to be a badass?
I would say that it doesn't really matter what you study, as long as you have the degree. And if you're smart, you'll study something that gives you options. I got a criminal justice criminology degree with a double major in history. So I'm truly not qualified to do anything other than what I'm doing.
There you go.
Where if you get a business degree, you may have options if something happens, injuries or whatever, if you have other options at that point.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And so Arvada requires a 4-year degree. What does Denver require?
Denver requires a high school diploma or equivalency. They do give you military preference points, but they are just getting ready to start recognizing college, and they're going to start paying for college degrees, whether it be an associate's or a bachelor's or even a master's.
Is that good? Do you think that's a good move?
I think it is very good. I think they should have. I think it's long overdue. When you get people who spend the time the discipline to get the degree, I think they should be appreciated by the cities and agencies for sure.
Amazing. Okay, well, speaking of like degrees and education, what characteristics in a person makes them a good police officer, in your opinion?
In my opinion, going to have to be some degree of selflessness. You're not going to get to pick and choose what you do, when you do it, what hours you work. You have to have common sense. You're going to be able to tell when people are telling you the truth or being straight with you, or if they're not necessarily so much. Got to be able to have the ability to see different angles into a situation, not just what your emotions may lead you to. Just because you're presented with one facts, you talk to the other person, their set of facts is going to be based on their perceptions. Just as true to them as the first person was, but somewhere in the middle, you'll probably find more of the truth. You have to be able to kind of take all the information you gather and come up with a sound decision.
Amazing. And speaking of the decisions, I think this is a perfect time to talk about the life cycle of an investigation and how it becomes an actual criminal case. And so as you're gathering this information, can you tell us a bit about like what that investigative process is and how something becomes a case?
It's not totally cut and dry because there's different types of cases, different information available per each case.
Yeah.
But essentially, you need to start by gathering the evidence and information you can at first. You need to look for more evidence if possible, follow up leads that you can dig up or are presented to you. You have to kind of go where that leads you. You have to be able to deal with people, whether they want to deal with you or not. You have to be able to kind of see for what it's worth the evidence you have. Some more valuable than others. Some it's hard and fast. This is what it is, and some it's kind of got to interpret it or look for something else to corroborate that. And then kind of go where that takes you.
Is it true that everyone is a suspect at first? Or do you kind of know when you get on scene, like who you're looking for?
To a degree, yeah, everybody, until you got that information, everybody could be technically a suspect. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. Like, well, this person clearly wasn't at fault, or this person clearly wasn't the aggressor, this person was clearly, taken advantage of. That's not always as hard to determine in some cases as it is in other cases.
So if you walk into a crime that involves a victim, because there are different crimes, there's drug crimes, it's kind of victimless. There's like traffic crimes that maybe do or do not involve a victim. But in situations where they involve a victim and you've established that this is the victim, kind of what can a victim, by the legal definition, expect from the police in regards to how to interact with them? How can they participate in the case in a way that keeps them informed, but also isn't getting in the way of what you need to do? If you could talk to a victim right now, what would you tell them?
So currently I'm a traffic investigations detective. Okay, so most of what I deal with now, or majority of what I deal with now, is going to be involving serious or fatal injury accidents, all the way down to if somebody runs from the police or is involved in a hit and run. So that's kind of a wide variety of cases for seriousness. Obviously, my fatal accidents are much more in depth of investigation than some of the simpler ones, for lack of a better term. Okay, I try to talk to everybody, the victims I can. Now, understanding that I work nights, so a lot of times my interactions may be through email or through the internet. When I get phone calls during the day, it's not that I'm not answering the phone calls. It's just that I'm not there to answer the phone calls, which sometimes upsets people. I have a short window before normal people, the average person goes to bed, I'm still up working. So if I try to make the phone calls best I can in that time frame, explain where we're at, get the information I have, let them know. I try to be honest, let them know what information I have to follow up on, what I may or may not have. Try to explain their expectations, kind of make them a little more realistic. Like, well, there's cameras everywhere. Well, there are cameras everywhere, but not all every camera records. Not every camera shows the direction you want it to show. Just because it may be recorded on the camera doesn't mean it's the movies where you can enhance it to the minute detail. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I kind of explain, I may be able to get this or I may not be able to get this, but you got to kind of understand what it may or may not show.
Well, that is really great that you bring that up, because I think oftentimes everyone thinks there's DNA. Everyone thinks there's cameras. Everyone thinks this is First 48 or CSI. And that's just not always what we have available to us. However, I did attend a training with the traffic officers, and they showed us how there's a lot of science that goes into figuring out like at fault and crashes, and how somebody died or how they hurt themselves in a vehicular crash. And so how much of that do you know or do, or what can people expect when it comes to the science behind trying to figure out what has happened in a crash?
So it's very reliable to a degree. You can never account for all the energy in a clip. So you get a range. If I'm building speed, doing analysis for speed, I'll be able to say, okay, you're going between this speed and that speed. And it's got to be reasonable because I got to account for, there's going to be losses that can't be accounted for in these formulas. But you take into consideration everything you can from, drag coefficient, the surface that the roadway they're on, the type of vehicle, the position of that vehicle. Is it able to come up with 100% braking, or there's an issue with that car where maybe you only have 60% braking? All that's got to be figured in best we can figure out. That's why we make it a range, to make it fair for both the victim and the suspect. You can't say, okay, come up with a super high number. That wouldn't really be fair to the person getting arrested if that number may not be 100% accurate. But we also have other ways of doing this now. I mean, we have, bags have airbag controls, airbags now, all new cars. Those are controlled through an airbag controller, which more often than not now can be downloaded. And that records, depending on the age of the car, a lot of information to include the speed of the vehicle at the time that the airbag was deployed, which obviously helps that quite a deal, makes that whole nav process a lot easier.
Absolutely. I mean, our cars are so smart now, that's really probably helpful. And that's how we met. We met in a vehicular assault case. It was very tragic. 4 cars, 2 people seriously injured. Man was going like the wrong way on a very big road and ran the red light and hit several people. He was very intoxicated. And so, I was very impressed with kind of understanding the measurements and the math and all the science that went into that in order to understand what actually happened, because no one could tell. I mean, the victims are there, they're hit, they don't know what's happened, they have concussions. And then the person who hit them is so intoxicated, he can't tell you what happened. And there's some witnesses, but they're also confused. They're coming from different angles, like you said. Yeah. And the cameras that we had, they caught everything except the impact, if I remember our case correctly.
I believe you're right.
Exactly what you're saying. Everything.
But in that case, it was a little more obvious who the victims were and who the suspect was.
It absolutely was more obvious.
That's a good example of sometimes it's easier than others.
Exactly true. I mean, we can tell when the car is facing this way and they're supposed to be facing another way and all these cars are smashed. You can tell. But yeah, it's like that cameras, they caught everything except the actual crash, everything before and after. And so interesting. When we talk about sort of your history in being a police officer, you mentioned you've worked for other offices, other departments, and you've done other types of assignments. What other assignments have you done that involved victims?
Started out Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office. Didn't have a whole lot of victim interaction there. From there, I went to the
That was the jails? That was being in the jails, or?
That was being in the jail, yes. Which is not a bad place to start. Definitely see a lot more stuff that kind of helps, get your street smarts wised up a little bit faster, I would say. It's not a bad place to start.
Okay.
From there, I went to the Arvada Police Department. And their patrol unit handles most all its felony filings in those cases. So from there, I investigated a wide variety of crimes from beginning to end, which is, actually kind of good. Kind of builds you up as an officer, gives you that experience a little bit faster. From there, I went to the motorcycle unit. And while in the motorcycle unit, I also became involved in the accident reconstruction. So it would be like combining 2 units to one, I guess, in a way you could say. I took a lot of training there, got a lot of certifications while I was at the Arvada Police Department. Was involved with the Jefferson County Accident Response Team, as well as, for a while, the Adams County Accident Response Team. Involving investigation of accidents throughout the counties that may or may not have involved the other police agencies, which was kind of nice. From there, I went to the Denver Police Department, started out the patrol unit, went to the DUI unit for a spell, before, again, go to the motorcycle unit and then ultimately into the traffic investigation.
In regards to the motorcycle unit, is that the coolest one?
I thought it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. I mean, it's good and bad. You're always hot or you're always cold. There's not a whole lot in between in Colorado, but it's definitely nice when somebody gives you a motorcycle and said, "Here you go drive around." It's kind of hard to beat.
So let's talk about you mentioned that you get to be in cases from the beginning to the end. And, my original question really was, how do the investigations unfold and what happens to them after you're done? So let's talk about when you're done. When you are done with an investigation and you think, okay, there's a crime, I know what it is. What happens next?
Then I have to gather and document all that evidence to support what I know.
Okay.
Because, what people don't also understand is, I know he did it. Go get him. I know he did it too, maybe. But knowing something isn't proving something. So in order to prove something, I have to be able to document. So it means I have to gather all that evidence. Okay, and it may be enough where common sense will tell you, yeah, this is the person. But that may not be enough for a court. So that's kind of the point I want to make. It's important to know, but you got to be able to prove it. And proving that, you got to be able to document it, collect all the evidence you can collect, present it in a way that makes sense. And sometimes that's just not enough. When you take everything you got, all the evidence you have, maybe do your search warrants, gather all the information you can through various sources. And sometimes the DA's office or the judge still doesn't think that's quite enough to do it. And those are the hard ones. Because then, you could take a case that, why is it taking so long? Well, it's taking so long because this is more steps than the average case requires. It doesn't mean you stop. You keep going as long as you have something to follow up on, someplace to gather the evidence. Sometimes you may need to have the person arrested to do get a warrant to take their DNA, to compare their DNA from this DNA collected at the scene. If you're not in contact with them, or if they've left the state, then it's that much harder to get that last piece you may need. So there's no real time frame I can give you, unfortunately. Sometimes, if everybody stays local and all the information evidence handed to you on a civil platter, it's nice and quick and easy and in and out. You have everything you need, it's able to present it right away. But more and more often, it's not always the case.
How can a victim help ensure that you have the evidence that you need? And I'll preface this with, oftentimes I have clients who want to constantly call the detective, tell them new information, tell them what's going on. Today, this happened, How can they present it in a way that is helpful, but not disruptive to what you're trying to do?
Well, I kind of glossed over this earlier, which I do need to get back to. Talk about dealing with, working with the victims. I try to talk to them when I can. If nothing else, I get a lot of emails back and forth, so I'm trying to stay in contact best I can. That being said, they'd be surprised how many people don't set up their mailboxes and their phones or don't answer their phones and are upset that you didn't call. Well, I did call. Your mailbox is full. Empty that once in a while. Or set up your voicemail.
Right.
Well, you should try harder. It's not my job to chase after you. You're not the only thing sitting on my desk right now.
No, you have a whole city of crimes to handle.
Yeah, but it's not the way people see things now, or some people see things now. Now it's, you should chase after me like, my mother.
Right.
And I can't do that. I can try to call you, try to get in touch with you, leave messages so you can call me back. And then during these conversations, I'm being honest with what I have and what I can do and what I can't do. Some people are like, well, I know I can recognize them. That's great. I'm more than happy to show you a photo lineup, but I have to have somebody put in that photo lineup that could have feasibly been, the person who did it. Or I get pictures. I saw this so-and-so on the news. Okay, that could be the person. Well, you have to have something that puts that person in your crime or your crime scene. A random person to an unrelated story on the news doesn't really do that. I could take a picture of you and say, hey, no, she did this to me 3 years ago. How do I prove that you were the person that was there 3 years ago?
Exactly.
You got to be realistic expectations.
Exactly. Realistic expectations. And this is what I'm able to explain to my clients is there are, certain rules and procedural rules and laws and the Constitution that police have to follow. So we might think common sense, this is who it is, this is how we can find them. But if it's not something that's admissible in court, we can't just follow down everything if it's not, giving us real reasonable suspicion, to use a legal term, or, all the things that would allow a police officer to go and talk to someone. Like, they can't just knock on everyone's door that a victim tells them to knock on. I mean, that's not really how the system works either. So,
since you brought that up, I get that. Well, how come they're not cooperating? Make them talk. Yeah, can't really do that. There's, the Constitution that's kind of a no-no. Kind of have to do things the right way.
They have a right to remain silent.
That was an option.
They don't have to talk to the police, and they have a right to an attorney. Absolutely.
Who will 9 times out of 10 tell them not to cooperate or talk to the police, because that's their job.
Exactly.
And that's something I think people don't really understand. I don't know if it's TV or they just want their justice so bad that they overlook it. It's hard to explain. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, this is why I think it's important for victims to have attorneys, is because I have the time to explain it. A prosecutor can't say everything to them. And yes, prosecutors and police are governed by the Victim Rights Act to keep them informed, but you have to protect the integrity of your investigation. And a victim is a witness. Prosecutor, same thing. They can't really say too much. They have to protect the integrity of the investigation and the prosecution. But me, as a former DA and as a victim rights attorney, I have the time and ability to manage those expectations on behalf of law enforcement, and so that my client can have more trust in the process and more in an educated, intelligent fashion participate in it in a way that doesn't harm the potential for them getting justice down the road. And so this is why I'm really glad that you're on today and we're able to kind of help manage those expectations in a broader sense and let people know when police are not reaching out. It's not that they don't want to, it's that maybe they can't. They also may not have any information. And also, there are rules as to who they can actually investigate and how they go about it. And so it's important to respect those rules and understand them. And the population often doesn't. It's not like we're taught this in school. Having an attorney to explain that can be helpful. We have media, we have all these things happening in the justice system where just nobody trusts it at all. And so so there you get the anxiety, the anxious attachment to the case that these victims will have, because they genuinely, they're being programmed to not trust the process. And then they want to demand more and know more. So they just need more information. But you're not allowed to give it to them. You literally can't talk about a suspect. You can't give away everything that's going on in an investigation, because then if that victim talks to a cousin or a friend, particularly when we know that crimes are usually committed by people that are close to the victim, they say one thing to a friend or a cousin. Now the defendant knows you're onto them and your whole investigation is thrown off. So it's just, you can't say much to them. So it's nice to be able to have, me or the victim advocates, even in your office or in the DA's office, to kind of help them understand their expectations. And in speaking to that, what do you have in DPD to talk to victims? Who should they be actually contacting? It shouldn't probably be the detective every 2 seconds, but don't you have victim advocates?
We do, but you should definitely start with the detectives, because the victim advocates can help with certain things, but they're not going to be directly involved in the case either.
Okay.
Sometimes I've had victim advocates set up meetings between me and family of victims, which is, totally understandable, especially towards the end of the investigation, once everything's filed and into the courts. Then it's got a little more leeway what you can give at that point, because it's kind of done at that set. Once the courts has it, it's not like I may add to it on occasion, but it's not like I need to track people down when I've already gotten all that information done. I've already got people to track down, I need to track down and submitted what I need to have submitted to the DA's office. But I would definitely start with the detectives, because they're going to be the one directly involved in the case. You got to understand, though, I can't give you everything. Well, I wanted to know this. What are you doing? Well, I'm still working. I've got things I'm tracking down, or I'm following up on this lead maybe. But it's not going to be detailed what my day-to-day operation is. I'm not going to be micromanaged because you want to have your finger in this pie. Okay, this is not going to work that way, and I wouldn't let it work that way. Especially if I want to have a successful investigation. Again, it can't be every day. Can't get my work done if I'm shaking down, you and every other victim of every case I have every day to say, hey, it's nothing new. Hey, I'm still working on it. When I have updates, I'll call and give the updates or send an email more than likely. just because I can do that at midnight and not disturb people's home life. When we get closer to it, sometimes, depending on the case, I'll have more contact with you. Sometimes you've already kind of moved on to the victim's advocates or the victim's advocate to the district attorney's office. It's not like it's always one way. Some people have more contact with than others, but some cases require that. Some cases, maybe once or twice and then some emails to kind of keep you up to date with what's going on. The victim's advocates kind of pick up from there and say, okay, this is where we're at in the process. They kind of give you more of a day-to-day. Here's your court times, and here's where you're going to have to be, and here's the resources available to you that would know better than I would.
Thank you for that candid, very honest, and straightforward way to explain how victims should interact with the police and what they should expect. Thank you. I would like to talk about safety planning. I know that you spent time in the past helping women, particularly with certain forms of safety planning. Can you tell us about that?
For a while in a previous department, I was a SHARP instructor. That's sexual harassment and rape prevention instructor. So we'd have classes that would last a month and a half for a group of women at a time, for everything from maybe some ideas you hadn't thought of to physical ways to protect yourself or discourage bad behavior.
Did you show them how to kick them in the balls?
That wasn't one of the main go-to ones because it's not always as effective as you think it would be. But we showed them some good stuff on punches, kicks, how to escape grabs, chokes, simple things, how to just release a grab and get out from somebody grabbing your arm, or maybe moving somebody out of your way, trying to block your way in the office just to be obnoxious. There's kind of a wide variety of physical moves plus some common sense things to look out for. Be aware of your surroundings, trust your gut. Maybe not be overly sharing with people right off the bat.
Oh, God. I feel attacked. What are you talking about?
I thought that was more of a reinforcement.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So does that mean that you're going to show me some moves tonight when I come over to the office?
I can show you a couple things.
Okay.
Like?
I would love that. And then as far as just in general, like keeping people on the Rolodex, like having emergency contacts. I mean, when do these things come into play? A lot of people travel. We live in an age where women travel for school. They leave their families behind. If something happens, how can the police know who to contact? How can they know how to quickly contact people?
Well, it would depend on the reason for it. If you're traveling for school, hopefully you have friends and, other people that know you. But you have to know your resources in the area you're traveling to as well. Who to talk to, who's the local police department, who's people you can trust in that area, who has access to your family, who has access to the information for your family. You're going to need some kind of resources to be able to manage them. And if you're just traveling like on vacation, you may not necessarily know all that stuff. So you kind of have to rely on yourself a little bit more, I would say. Common sense, trusting your gut, not putting yourself in situations that you can avoid that might not be healthy for you if you can.
Yeah. And then I recently learned about some cool automated things that our cell phones can do.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I know I shared that with you. And so I want everyone to know, stay tuned for my TikToks. I'm going to go ahead and share some of the SOS protocols that I programmed into my iPhone that is detective approved. Okay. DPD approved safety mechanisms that I put into my cell phone that I think will be really helpful for everyone. And so essentially, the brief version of that is with iPhone, you can create these shortcuts where as soon as you hit just one little button, your phone will go ahead and start doing a series of whatever you program it to do. So for me, it's going to send out notifications to everybody on my SOS text chain is what I'm calling it. And then it's going to start recording what's going on around me for a minute and send it out. It's going to record for 5 minutes and send it out. It's going to give my location before all of that. It's going to give my location and give instructions. So everyone to please call 911 and give this location, longitude, latitude, and the link to where I am. And so my phone is just going to send all of that out immediately. And so that's something I'll be sharing on TikTok for my clients and my community And that's another way to just really safety plan and make sure. And if you have a detective on your case, so most obviously my clients are victim rights clients. So they have open criminal cases. And so what are your thoughts, Detective Armstrong, on them including their detective on an SOS protocol that their phone might be doing? I mean, the detective's already familiar with who their abuser is, right? Like if something happens to them and their phone sends out, hey, I'm being hurt right now. This is where I am. Here's the recording, audio, video. Can they put their assigned detective on that text chain? Is that appropriate?
You know, I would talk to that detective, because if I have a case with you today and you put text chain on there, and then that text chain doesn't get activated for 10 years, that might not be the most effective use of your resources. Now, depending on the relationship you end up having with your detective, maybe absolutely, you know, if there's some kind of ongoing deal, absolutely might not be the worst case in the world, but you want to talk to that detective, let them know, get their thoughts.
So we've talked a lot about being a police officer and what that means and all your expertise when it comes to that. Well, one of the other reasons I really wanted to bring you on was for my community and just people to know that police are also people. So would you mind sharing with us your favorite hobbies?
Kind of depends what I have time for. I mean, I like woodworking, fixing up the house, stuff like that. That's kind of where tinkering around the garage is kind of where I'm happiest, I'd say.
And driving motorcycles. It makes you
driving
cool.
motorcycles. It is fun. It is fun.
That makes you cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we definitely like motorcycles, playing with cars. Absolutely. Kind of a more older guy, so I'm less on the computers, more into the doing stuff with your hands. I think just because that's the way it was back then.
Yeah. Do you like camping? I love camping.
We used to go camping a lot more when the kids are smaller. Now I'm older and beat up. I like hotel rooms. I like traveling, just hitting the hotel room.
So you like the glamping, as they say?
More of the hoteling.
Just hoteling. Okay. No wilderness at all. Okay, great.
No camper. It's still a lot of work. Still a lot of work.
That. And you mentioned you have children, and we don't have to go into that. You know, I want to protect your privacy, and it's important. But you know, you're a family man. You have a family, and this is most officers do, right? I mean, you're going out in the world and doing what you're doing and serving your community, but then you're going home to families, right?
Yeah, I mean, my children are all grown now, but yeah, got to go home to your family. Got to make sure you make it home every day for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I want everyone to remember that as we talk about police and how we need them and rely on them in society. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been interesting times with recent history.
I know.
For sure.
Until we become victims, and then we want them to just do everything, right? Yeah, fix everything.
Better than, I would say, when they need you. You're more important than if they don't need you, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think attorneys feel similar in a lot of ways. When people hear I'm an attorney, they're like, explain this to me. Why are you an attorney? Particularly when I was a DA. And it's like, no, we're needed. Like, you have to have these infrastructures in place to keep a civilized society. You just do. Mm-hmm. And so respect it, value it, honor it. It doesn't mean there aren't critiques. I mean, we critique our legislators, we critique everybody. Everything has to always grow and evolve, but you just have to start from a place of knowing that it's necessary and knowing that everyone who enters these professions could make a lot more money doing other things. Okay. So they come into it with a desire to serve. And so I think that's important to.
I would agree. I'd say that's a fair statement.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, good. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you want us all to know before we sign off today on how to engage with police, what to expect, just anything to kind of sum up for my clients and my community?
I'll just kind of keep in mind that the officers they're human too. Going to be, officers are better suited to the job than others, but how you treat people is generally the way you're treated. If you want to have a bad experience with somebody, you go off on that foot to make it a bad experience. Unfortunately, sometimes you can end up with a bad experience. If you go there, the average person, treat somebody how you'd like to be treated, and 10 times out of 10, the experience is going to be, good, a good experience, definitely positive. Just got to be fair about it.
Thank you so much, Detective Armstrong. I always ask my guests How can we find you if we need to talk to you? What number would you recommend? Let me guess.
Well, there's always 911.
Of course.
But you can contact me at, I'm the only Detective Armstrong of the Denver Police Department. You can always get in touch with me through the Denver Police Department.
Wake up with the sunrise, meditate to clear my mind. Thank you for this breath, I'm ready to be surprised. Don't know where I'm going, but I'm ready for the ride. Don't know where I'm going, but I know I got my guide.